Okay, it's day 90. This is part one. Lots of confirmations coming in. Here's an article by BuzzFeed, normally PP Dossier BuzzFeed, but they have a great reporter in Jason Leopold, and he's done an article here about payments to Russian embassy employees. These are going to be the Centreville payments, but they're also going to include the New York payments to the Braverman consulate, to the New York Braverman consulate up in Russia. And I do believe Braverman was the agent or representative in New York for some of the spying activities that occur in New York. We'll go over the payments first to the ambassador, and then we'll go to the payments, to the 600 payments to the different Russian immigrants. So here's Sergei Kislyak. I believe the payments are going to be through Jeff Sessions now. There's going to be two payments, one just after the election and then one just after the inauguration. One's $120,000 that went through, and then after Trump takes over and Mnuchin is running the Secretary of the Treasury, they catch this suspicious activity transfer here of $150,000 to Kislyak. So Kislyak is definitely implicated. The total amount of payments is about $2.4 million in payments to Russian spies, as well as contractors and so forth. But these are kickbacks and bribes. Here's the 120 days after the election. Here's the $150,000 that didn't go through. Then they flagged this set of checks here when Braverman was running the Clinton Foundation in New York from March to April 7th. And these are just basically renovations to the consulate in New York City, which is $370,000. This series took you there last summer with when I was there with Jason. And then over 5 years ago, over 5 years through the Russian Cultural Center here in Washington, D.C., another $325,000 was passed through there. And a lot of times what you'll do when you bring in spies and so forth, you'll pay for their school, you'll pay for their housing, you'll pay for all their different living expenses, and that's one of the ways to reduce the total amount that needs to be laundered. Through the period of time, more than $2.4 million over the 5 years occurred. So that's the key thing. And there was about 600 such payments from 2013 to March 2017. So these are not just contractors. These are people that are doing spying as well. You mix the two together to hide them. Again, here's the suspicious activity reports that you've been introduced to in the series coming in handy again. So, and I'll just say there's the picture of Kislyak, and I'll quickly go to just a quick overview of his $120,000, how he laundered it. He shared it between two different accounts to try to get it under that $100,000 figure. And then this is the 30 checks for $370,000 for the embassy renovation, or excuse me, the consulate renovation, the Braverman consulate in New York. And I also believe that Braverman made many trips to this consulate for spying on financial figures in New York, as well as stock market folks and all the people involved in the New York financial community, as well as down here in Washington, D.C. Again, I'm saying Braverman is a good guy, though. At the end of the day, he does buckle when he sees what's happening in Haiti and other places with the Clinton Foundation money and some of the things that the Clinton Foundation is doing with the money. Braverman, I'm saying, is a good spy, but he drew the line. And so next thing is, speaking of spies, we'll talk about Sid Blumenthal with the, non-official cover, let's say, journalist with a non-official cover. We now find that Blumenthal was paid by Fusion GPS, and this is more for the disinformation campaign in Europe. Again, Sid concentrates mostly in Europe. He was very good friends with Tyler Drumheller, got all the plans for Zero Footprint and Timber Sycamore, etc. We must have done 100 stories on him at the start of this series, and also very good friends with Valerie Plame. All these people, again, play into the whole uranium game. The whole structuring of the uranium game, really, especially with NATO, is Valerie Plame and Sid Blumenthal. Okay, quickly moving on to the old Tennessee Valley Authority, the electrification project, kind of became the Uranium Valley because these gas centrifuges require so much energy. So it became the kind of area of expertise of all these scientists that moved there. There's Oak Ridge was this hidden city and so forth. And a lot of the early Navy guys went there for training. Now, I'm not saying Bannon went there for training at Fort Campbell for nuclear training, but here is the Nuclear Training Center, Navy Nuclear Power Training School, down in South Carolina. This is in Charleston, South Carolina. and it's named after Admiral Rickover, who's kind of like the father of the nuclear navy. Now, he originally did his training in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So before they built this school in 1955, that was done in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And you can see that. I'll quickly go here to the next piece, which is near Oak Ridge is this Jonesboro Aerojet factory. And the Jonesboro Aerojet factory, the reason why they're concerned with depleted uranium is these weapons, it's leaking into the soil, etc. There's these protest groups. So that's very close, actually, and you can see the rolling hills here and so forth, to this Aerojet Rocketdyne factory. Okay, looking at Jonesboro is almost directly south of Piketown, Ohio. Piketown, Ohio was where I was about an hour away from when I was stopped on my after my visit with Deep Uranium on June 15th, 2017. You can see how it's kind of directly south. Here's where Mark Lambert went to school, the University of Cincinnati. And it's a straight south shot to Jonesboro. Now, they used to make weapons up here at this factory in Piketown, and you have to get rid of these the tailings of that process. The tailings of that process is depleted uranium. So were the Piketown murders, were the Roden murders and so forth, the people taking depleted uranium down to the plant here in Jonesboro? Well, I'll give you some information that may be helpful in that decision making. First of all, currently in Hartsville, in between Clarksville, where the old nuclear school used to be, and Oak Ridge, we have Cameco, the Canadian company, Cameco, pulling out. Depleted uranium, we also did a lot of stories on depleted uranium. I think this story is going to be about depleted uranium going from Piketown, as we had said before, to Jonesboro. I just didn't know exactly where the weapons factory was, but depleted uranium obviously figures big into the story. If you didn't remember what... something else from the story first yesterday was the Argonne National Laboratories, and people were wondering, was that Fermilab or whatever? No, that's in California, I believe. This is actually just outside Chicago. We actually sold them some 3D printing to their research group. It was originally based on Enrico Fermi's work there on nuclear reactors, but what most people don't know about Argonne National Laboratories is it's where all the Navy nuclear power plants reactors were designed. It was the first power-producing nuclear reactors that helped design the reactors used by the nuclear Navy right there, beginning in the post-war period. A site called Nuclear Information and Resource Services, and they do different environmental justice type movements and so forth. But they've got a lot of information on this Louisiana Energy, which is wholly owned by Urenco. So all you have to do is follow Louisiana Energy to really follow the movements of Urenco in the United States. Urenco, again, is the company I am saying took uranium intended for Europe and sent it to the UAE and then on to Iran. If this is the case, the U.S. enrichment case in 2004, talking about the original application to get the American centrifuge plant in Piketown, Ohio, in 2004, and the main concern was, again, depleted uranium. There was no plan of action for depleted uranium. You can see right here. And I'm going to just say it's quite simply just went into weapons in Aerojet in Jonestown, and it's being stockpiled. It was a problem piling up in Piketown, and it was just taken to Jonesboro, and using depleted uranium weapons. From the very beginning of this series, I think going back 240 days, I should say, we've been talking about depleted uranium and its use. So I ask again, is Steve Bannon the key architect of this uranium backbone in America in terms of the Navy trading? As far as the Navy's representation in terms of trading with other countries, is Steve Bannon one of the key players in how the Navy invests its money?